Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another lesson in class. Now, hopefully one day I'll get my own philosophy class once I get my all degrees and those pieces of paper that says that I'll be able to do as such, because sometimes people need stuff on paper for them to believe things or whatever, or somebody with credentials. How do I say this? Not that just did their time, because there's a thing called a catch 22, like mission 22, right? Did you do this? Did you do that? Did you do this? Did you do that? Blah 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 blah. And then they try to find a loophole where they can try to get you or point out a flaw or something. It's really stupid and childish, but you can normally tell who didn't read or pay attention or go to the library to even make an effort or an attempt to want to learn and understand something. It's like asking someone if the Black's Law Dictionary is real. Someone says it's not, and then you walk into a public law library and you realize the Black's Law Dictionary is real. So let's get into lesson 58. To understand is to see, right? Because without understanding, well, then how are you going to get anything, right? I mean, think about lesson 50 and the title there, right? So we're going to go ahead and continue with this continuing education with point one. What does it mean to see? Well, if you remember other lessons, right? To hear with your eyes, right? To see with your ears. If you were to close your eyes, how would a deaf person think daredevil or whatever, right? Or a dolphin, echolocation, or bats, right? How do they see? Well, they use echolocation. They see with their ears. Yes or yes, right? They don't see necessarily with their eyes all the time. They may be able to hear certain things, right? Like an artist, when they look at a painting, they can't see the people in the painting whispering or talking in the Last Supper, but they can almost see something and hear it as well as it's depicted like a painting, right? So you have to understand this in order to, well, not be so nitpicky at certain things, because some people will get flustered, frustrated, and try to act or pretend to be something, right? And then, of course, when they pretend, oh my God, I didn't know that. Oh my God, and they try to change their persona or whatever in order to get by or whatever, or to sound as though they belong, right? It's like sneaking onto a military base because you think you know the rhetoric and lingo, and they let you get on real easy, because the moment you go into an area you are not allowed to go to, that shit changes quick. You get caught and you are already in the lion's den. So have fun, boo-boo. All right? So think about that before you do anything stupid or dumb. All right? So if somebody says, are you picking up what's being laid down by others, right? Well, are you picking up what's being laid down by others? And yes, as you know, I keep an outline because there's a certain sequence to almost everything in life. Because if people don't have a type of sequence, right, then you're not going to know where to go. You'll be all over the place, right? Or if you need to have a conversation, if you study, the Pickup Artist Society, right? They talk about threading, right? So think of it like having a conversation and putting a pause, right? So that's one. And then I could come back to that later. This was taught by Eric von Markovic, right? And Neil Strauss, another famous author, so on and so forth, and another professor within the community. And then, of course, you could go into another conversation. So how was your day? This, that, and the third, blah, 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 this, that. This happened, blah, 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 at work. And then I got home and this happened and blah, 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 blah. All right, well, I could cut it right there, right? Because they gave me a lot of stuff. Think like psychology or whatever. And I say, okay, well, tell me about what happened at work first. So that's another thread that you can throw out there. Not like, like if you were weaving doesn't have thread in it. Like if you were sewing, right? So that'll be one thread. So they get through that, so on and so forth. So now I can either cut that thread or pause it, right? Because I say, how does this at work affect what happened at home? So let's talk about what happened at home. So let's put this on pause. So now I have two that I can go back to when it comes to communicating with somebody that wants to communicate and vent and get something off their chest. So I ask how your day was. They tell me everything about their day. And then I put a pause. Okay, tell me what happened at work, and then how'd that affect your home life? right? So now I'm moving into another thread. That's the third thread. Now, because they're opening up freely, I'm able to have this conversation, psychologically speaking, just like a therapist or a psychologist would, right? I mean, a psychiatrist is pretty much a legalized drug dealer. They have to take, well, things like chemistry and everything else. Whereas a psychologist, well, they will get to listen and have the art of communication, right? Kind of like a lawyer uses the art of communication, kind of like an auditor reads communication, such as like on a ledger. If you're working with accountants or something like that, or if you're working with attorneys, you have to understand what's being presented in front of you. So it would behoove some auditors to, well, have a background in marketing, because if you have a background in marketing, you know copywriting, and copywriting is the way you write for advertisements, landing pages, and everything else that get people to take an action, right? So if you understand that, then where was the action taken, in either in the courtroom or either, you can use that. Or how is this playing out? Because it's not dictated as miscellaneous supplies on the accounting ledger, but the books are off. The numbers kind of make sense, but what terminology and vernacular are they using to play in the gray area of accounting? You remember the movie The Accountant? He was raised by his pop, so on and so forth, etc. He's great with accounting. Ben Affleck and the guy that plays Punisher is in there, and they were both, doing their thing. And he understood how to look at the numbers a certain way. But once it gets past an accountant or a forensic accountant, and then once certain things like policy, because policy falls and changes, it's written by lawyers and attorneys, and it's normally the other side, but marketers have to interpret it, right? You heard of the GDPR, right? That's a web protocol that dictates how data and stuff like that is, utilized, etc. when it comes to cookies and pixels and all that other fun stuff. But if you guys are studious, then you understand all this, right? So this is why you have to understand, because understanding is to see, right? If you understand what's being written in your accounting books, and there's more than 3 depending on the level of business that you're doing, but there's normally a standardization of 3, right? You have your profit loss statement, your income statement, and a balance sheet that talks about revenue and expenses, right? Because in law, you also have trust law, right? 3 strikes, right? And so those 3 books could be like 3 strikes in the financial world if you're being investigated for financial fraud or anything else like that. So, I mean, you really have to pay attention to these things, because if a forensic auditor comes into the company, you already passed 3 strikes. Now you're on strike 4, and this is what you asked for, right? Not to give a call back to my veterans out there, but it's the same thing, right? Because even in magic, and I have more than 20 years, that's a different gang, right? Because at the castle, they have words like couscous. What is that? Well, a chef uses couscous. Well, yeah, Gordon Ramsay uses couscous too. Or what's this? What's keep it on the DL? Or is that a DL? Or what's a brief, right? Because in the magic community, a brief could be a break. But in the business world, a brief could be an attorney or lawyer. So you actually have to understand the context in which people are articulating their rhetoric, because some people are stuck on stupid and they get offended with pitch, tonality, and everything else, right? And then, of course, they try to get by sounding sweet, because they think if they change the way they speak, it won't, come off the same way. It won't give off different vibes, as they say, right? But remember, in Wakanda, everybody wanted to acquire vibranium. So why would they hack into a system so that they learn how to pick a lock? Like, that's never going to fucking happen again. And so that they could speak a certain way, act a certain way, so on and so forth, right? Who are they trying to fucking fool? I mean, get the fuck off your goddamn high horse and stop acting like a dumbass stuck on stupid, right? You know what the fuck you're doing. You know why the fuck you're getting close. You know exactly why proximity awareness and situational awareness is fucking correct, right? But people don't appreciate that, because you sound like a drill instructor. And when you sound like a drill instructor, people get rubbed the wrong way, right? It's like sounding like DMX. If you guys know the artist DMX, he doesn't sound like Talib Kweli. He doesn't sound like Mos Def. He doesn't sound like Nina Simone. Who else? Alicia Keys. He has a certain way of depicting himself, right? So, I mean, think about that. So, I mean, let's continue, but let's do a mic check first. And in the meantime, go ahead and like and subscribe if you want to continue. And if you want to drop this lesson or drop this class, you can. You're more than free to leave. It's up to you. So let's move into number 2. What does it mean to listen, right? To hear with intent to understand, right? Because many people would say, oh, I feel like you're hearing me, but you're not listening. Right? And how many people have been in relationships where they're like, I feel like you're hearing me, but you're not listening. And the person loses their mind. They're like, what does that mean? I am hearing you. I am listening. There's synonyms, but there's a difference, especially when it comes to vocabulary and definitions. To hear, yeah, you can hear sound. I can hear the wind. I can hear how it affects the trees, so on and so forth, etc. Right? I can hear, if I were to take this bottle and hit the table, what it sounds like, right? But are you listening, right? Are you trying to understand what's being said? Like people sitting in a church or class or wherever, right? Or during a presentation or a TED Talk, whatever the case may be. So are you listening, Linda, or are you trying to be a Lilith and send somebody to hell? Think about it. So why is the T silent, right? Trust one, right? I mean, if the T is silent in listen, then I guess real G's move in silence like lasagna, right? I mean, I had somebody that was trying to pretend a lot. And I remember when I first met them, they reminded me a little bit of my mother. They were like, do you know who I am? And I was like, yeah, you're Sandy from Greece. It was a Halloween party. She's like, how did you know that? I don't know, the hair, the outfit, etc., etc. People's favorite movie, my favorite movie, along with Grease 2, which was different, so on and so forth, because the T-Birds actually were cheating off of Michael, or they were supposed to pay him, actually, to do their homework and everything like that. But in real life, I don't think that ever actually happened. I think they just kept screwing him over or something like that, or somebody did. I have no idea. So, I mean, think about it. What does it mean to listen? This one's real quick, right? It's to listen, to hear. To listen is to hear with the intent to understand. So if you want to understand something, then listen, right? Or pay attention, right? Don't freak out, but pay attention, right? Some people look for visual cues, right? I had my ex-fiance. She's now happily married, because I am the complete opposite of practical magic. When people end up in a relationship with me, the next relationship they normally end up in is normally the one that they end up getting married to, or if they cheat on me or whatever, something normally happens in a positive, lighter sense. But in practical magic, you got to remember that the females, the ones that they fell in love with, died. Which one would you have? I don't know. Would you rather live or would you rather die? It's up to you. But, it's one of those things, right? And I used to joke around and be like, yeah, no, the Nicole Kidman character and Sandra Bullock, one of them reminds me of an aunt of mine. Super awesome, extremely intelligent. But I promise you, if I were you, I'd listen to her, because it would behoove you, as they would say, to listen to her, right? And not just hear her, listen to her. So, why do I state that? Well, the reason why I bring up Nicole Kidman is because of the TV show Lioness. See, in Lioness, there's a part where she sits down in front of army personnel or high-ranking military officials and everything. They make a sarcastic comment, and she just comes back with the wit. That woman is fast. She is so quick, it's not even funny. She's quicker than a puma, I can tell you that. And then, of course, you have Zoe Saldana's character, who has different rhetoric and sometimes gets emotionally struck or distraught, and just has a way of expressing herself that's different than Nicole Kidman's character, right? Nicole Kidman can be very well much reserved in that, in those scenes and everything, and she's also very intelligent, just like her counterpart. And the thing is that because the counterpart is also in the field and has to speak a certain way to individuals, especially of a different gender, or let's say DNA structure, right? So that they understand it and speak in their context with plain English, not trying to guess or use wordplay or whatever. She needs to get it out there quickly, because it's important. It's an emergency if she's acting, right? And if she has to bring her team or her crew, it's definitely an emergency, right? So, I mean, things could be damaging, right? They could be, how do I say this? Let's work backwards. So there's an emergency only category, right? If we're going to go down the letters of the alphabet, so you have A, right? So on and so forth. B, bravo, so on and so forth, etc. Yay, you figured it out. Bravo, right? Or you have C for curious. These are the ones that want to listen, hear, watch, and know everything, like, right, so on and so forth. So you have C. Then you have D, right? This is where things get a little bit tricky, right? Some people may be demented or dumb or, whatever the case may be, but they don't know when to stop. And so that's when that part comes in. And then, of course, if they don't know when to stop, well, you heard of a failure to stop drill, and now that becomes an emergency, right? And that's just my rhetoric, right? If you don't understand what I'm saying, go ahead and translate it or look it up or Google it. But that's what I'm trying to get across to individuals, right? So most want to know, but don't want to see. You remember Cypher in the movie Matrix, right? He got to see, he got unplugged, and then he wanted to go back, right? He picks up the steak and he eats it. Oh, I know this steak's not real, etc. It's like going to McDonald's. I know this burger meat is processed, or going to Jack in the Box, right? Don't forget the logo and the colors. Why somebody would say, burger. But, he wanted to go back, right? He wanted to just forget everything, right? And that was Cypher, right? He wanted to do that, right? But then you had Neo, who didn't mind being not only unplugged, he just didn't like the fact after he found out, especially in the last one, how the analyst, Neil Patrick Harris, who was also the former president of the Magic Castle, who was playing a psychiatrist at the time, prescribed him, I think it was like red or blue pills or whatever, saying he was bipolar or had some psychiatric stuff wrong with him, trying to keep him under, etc. And then, of course, he woke up. And then now they were trying to like push him back into it when he got unplugged. Morpheus was in it. Don't know if you saw the new one, but it was pretty interesting, right? So most people want to see. It's also like the movie with Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart. Wanted to know. And then he's like, wait. I don't want to do it anymore. He goes, too late. You're already a part of it. You already know. Now you're a part of it. Sorry, can't help you. Etc. Right? You just wanted to see if he wanted to be a part of the gang or whatever the hell it's called, right? Which is a slang term, right? Some people use the word crew. Some people use the word mafia. Some people use the word cartel, so on and so forth, etc. Some people use these words jokingly. Other people take them literally. I mean, hell, in the military, you had the E4 mafia, right? And then you had the, the O3 cartel or the captain cartel. Then you had the O4 mafia. They're in charge of the E3 or E4s, etc. That's what we got to go to sometimes to get permission. And so it's just one of those things where the major will come out and be like, yo, what the fuck? Be like, I need you to go tell your Marines to do X, Y, and Z, blah, 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 or give me the information. Whatever the case, right? But it is what it is, right? People want to know, they want to see, they want to experience, and then when they get the experience, they want to quit the first day and they just want to quit, right? Or they don't like the confrontation within less than 15 minutes, and then they want to unload, and unload should clear because they're so emotionally charged, right? If you're going to use psychology in a conversation and you don't know how to adapt, right, and be like water, well, then you'll have a hard time being in a relationship with somebody in the Navy, right? See, in the Navy, especially, well, you got Navy SEALs, right? They have a pitchfork and everything like that, but water, right, is moldable, adaptable, etc. Like JKD, Jeet Kune Do, the art of the intercepting fist, which was developed by Bruce Lee, right? And he talks about being like water. And if you look at the Greek lettering, psi looks like a pitchfork, right? With the 3 prongs and everything like that. It's just held differently with the Navy SEALs. So think about that, because there's a certain reason they get trained a certain way, right? Because they understand the current, right? And the current is affected by the wind. And if the wind could be the Air Force, then how do you speak? Because the wind, what is on the air? That would be media, right? That would be marketing. That would be the radio, the frequency, right? The vibe that is being put out depending on the terminology and the tone, right? So let's continue. To live a life of bliss is to walk around blind because it is easy. And people take the path the path of least resistance, right? So if it's easy, why not do it? It's easy to steal from a store, right? It's easy to whatever. It seems hard to go to a library, but it's actually easy to study and do research. You just don't want to do it, right? It's easy to do squats. You do bench press already. It's easy to do that. You just don't want to have the pain there that lasts so long. And that's normally what people are trying to not say, right? Oh, I don't want to take that much time trying to acquire this. I don't want to be patient to acquire this. I do not want to have certain things hinder the speed in which that they're moving, so they'll try to either work around because they don't want to move slowly. But if somebody else did the work and they were moving quicker, and then they're being told to slow down because the person normally took the path of least resistance or the one that's least traveled, well, then of course they're going to tell you to slow down because they never did that before. They never went to the library. They never ran, X, Y, and Z. There's only a handful of people that do that. There's not that many people that do other things, right? There's not that many people that would sit there for hours analyzing stuff, reading policy, looking at data, so on and so forth, looking at numbers, and then trying to formulate that into creative and then put that into a picture for psychological purposes, double checking the copywriting, making sure that it checks out with legal, making sure that there's no lawsuits, etc., making sure that the territories in which you're advertising don't have or aren't affected by GDPR and everything else like that. And then, of course, if you want to solve a problem and you do study a lot, then you understand taking a nap while giving your brain a problem to solve helps you solve the problem quicker. Do your research, right? So people take the path of least resistance. That's why people cheat, right? If they're not getting something from someone, they'll get it from someone else. See, monogamy to me is the biggest con of all. It's just a survival tool. It's the way that you could split bills and, split rent and phone bills and everything. You don't need to have a contract, right? So just live together. Everybody will save money. Don't care if they sleep with anybody else. I mean, hell, they came back for a reason. It's not like they're going to pay their bills. They just probably wanted to sleep with them. All right, so let's move forward. To commune is to communicate with union, or with the intention of creating a union, right? So to communicate, right? If you're having a communicative dialogue with somebody, right? Not an argumentative one, but you are communicating, you're trying to create a union between yourself and the other individuals, or the other individual that you are speaking to, with that rhetoric to create a bond, a union, so on and so forth, right? In a format in which that you both understand, because either you both move at the same speed, or you ask questions for understanding, like in martial arts. If you study, let's say, jujitsu, well, how do you get into this? Or better yet, because I did wrestling, how do you do a Navy or a wizard? I heard that if you were standing and they have a single leg, I take my arm and I put it in between, and I'm supposed to do this and like fall forward, and then somehow, how do you do that? Or how do I ride legs, etc., to control the hips, so on and so forth? How does the cradle work, and how do you lock it in, right? So that's because you're trying not only to create a union, but you're trying to get better. But if you don't come forth with something like that, then you're never going to actually understand in wrestling how to do a Navy, how to do a wizard, how to do a cradle and lock it in, right? You're never going to develop that relationship with the other person, because all you're doing is hearing and not listening, right? When you listen in communication, you're able to deliver better answers. And the only way you get better answers out of life is to ask better questions. Same thing happens with AI. What does Tony Robbins teach? Tony Robbins teaches this, right? You have to be specific with what you want, right? So what does he say? Oh, I need money. Okay, here's a quarter, here's a dollar, now you have money. Oh, well, I wanted more money than that. Well, you didn't state that, so that's what you got, right? Now, I've been very specific before in the past, and it just hasn't worked out because it was trying to prove, I guess, his logic wrong, or that there was interference. But, oh, I want a relationship. Okay, here's a relationship. Well, you weren't specific. You didn't make a list of everything that you wanted in a character or individual that you wanted in your life. So you have to communicate, right, to find out. You have to play detective a little bit, right? And that's part of the process when it comes to relationship building and everything else. But not everybody is built the same. Some people are built different. And if they're built different, don't try to be the same way. Take small things like Bruce Lee, what he said, right? Take what's useful for you and apply it to your life and then succeed. Don't try to exactly copy the person directly, right? So for instance, in other lessons, I did a couple other things and I've been emulated before, and that's perfectly fine. Now, the only time I had a small conflict was that I didn't get to post it first, right? So I didn't even upload. So I was upset. I was like, oh, this SOB cheated, etc. And now this is happening. Let's go, right? Or I try to sound like Shakira, die, die, E-O, let's go, whatever the case may be, right? But it was because I needed to do that in order to get a point across, right? So let's move forward, right? Rapport comes after a union. Sex is not needed because not all unions require it, right? So I have a best friend named Ryan, right? Ryan and Danelle, they're married, etc. They're second in the United States for American Latin rhythm. They own a Fred Astaire dance studio, etc. And we built rapport after communicating. Hey, I like what you're doing. I like your style, this, that, and the third. Where'd you learn how to dance? Hold on, mic check. All right, we're still good. And we became best friends to the point where, what's it called? We would be hanging out and Danelle would be like, can I get my husband back, please? I'm like, but we're hanging out. You could talk to your boyfriend later. I need my husband right now. And I'm like, fine, go, do your thing. I'll talk to you later. Bye. And then, of course, it was just one of those things, right? And we didn't need to have sex for there to be a union. It was just something that we did, right? He did martial arts. He did, actually, if you're familiar with the Renaissance Festival, he did the medieval, what's it called? They fight with the long sword, the swords and stuff like that. I forgot the style of the martial art. And I did actual martial arts. I did Kali, JKD, etc. And I was trying to test the style between each other. And he would beat me, and then I would try other stuff. I would pick up 2 sticks or 1 stick. He would have his weapon of choice in a wooden format, and we would, spar and stuff like that. But that's what we did, right? And if you want to call it a form of sex, and then I guess it was a form of sex for us, but we were actually fighting. It's like if you enjoy jujitsu and you go out and do jujitsu for 6-7 hours, who cares? Right? The only person that's going to get upset is the person that wants your time. And time is valuable. Even Warren Buffett dictated that. It's the only commodity that you cannot purchase more of. So let's get down to the last 5 points, okay? So if you do not seek, one will not find, because asking leads to hearsay. If you do not seek for yourself, if you believe something something somebody tells you every single time, even if they have credentials or not, then somebody could dress up like them, act like them, use some of their rhetoric, and if you never opened up a freaking book or went to the library, you'll believe them, right? All they need is like a handful of people to make you believe it. If a doctor came to you and said, oh yeah, I know this person is taking a downer, but they're acting manic, which means hyper. How can a downer give hyper tendencies? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't correlate. But because nobody's going to answer or ask questions because of social engineering, they will just go based upon hearsay. Why? Because I heard someone say, right? That's called hearsay, right? So if you do your due diligence, if you go to the library, and God forbid people read books these days, right? You'd learn something. You'd be able to question, well, how does a downer create upper symptoms, right? Because it doesn't correlate, not even to the medical studies, right? It's similar to the Black's Law Dictionary. Why is it that UK law still presides in the United States today? Why did Disney had to enact the King Charles Act when Ron DeSantis removed protections? And how does that affect? And why does it still stand in the United States? How many of you can answer that? Not many. Not many do their research. And that's perfectly fine, right? This is why there is also trained professionals who do their research. Many of them, well, yeah, they got their degrees, they got their pieces of paper, they did their time in service, whatever the case may be. And they're able to speak on some people's behalf. They're able to defend them on or in a court. So I mean, think about it. Books versus digital. Remember, digital could be manipulated. This is why I say go to the library, right? Why do they burn books? Because if they're able to hack into your system and control things like deep fake videos and deep fake audio, you don't think they could change the words on your screen? You don't think a psychiatrist will love to freaking diagnose Google's Gemini or Chat GPT or whatever as being schizophrenic when it has hallucinations? You know how much money they would make? You know the kickbacks they would get? So let's move forward. Right? What's real and what's fake? That's why sex is not needed all the time. Right? Sex is supposed to be, well, a lot of people just like it to have fun, and it's used for fun. It's also used for romantic relationships and everything else, but it's not always needed. I mean, hell, I talked about books. I mentioned different stuff. Jesus didn't sleep with everybody at the freaking round table, did he? King Arthur didn't sleep with everybody at the round table. Sorry, the elongated table at the Last Supper. And it's elongated so that everybody could see. Everyone's sitting there. King Arthur had a round table because everybody at the table sat as equals. Think about it. You know, in some cultures or some groups, once you pass the third level, you're equal to the next person that is a little higher or more experienced than you, right? That's why in the army, everybody calls each other sergeant. Right? Hey, Sarge. Hey, Sarge this. They can be a gunnery sergeant. Hey, sergeant. Blah, 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 blah. Right? It's not specific. The specificity is what matters. And so different branches communicate a different way. You do that shit in the fucking Marine Corps, they'll slap you in the fucking face and correct you so fast it's not even funny. Why? Because they earned it and they expect to be addressed by such so that if something were to occur, there's specificity, right? Now, it's the same thing in a courtroom, right? Because you have hearsay, right? That's like saying, hey, Sarge, hey, Sarge, hey, Sarge. And, you know, then you have specificity. Here's the facts. Here's the evidence. Isn't it true that Staff Sergeant this? Who ordered the code red? Etc. Sir. Crystal clear? Crystal. All right? So who ordered the code red? Think about it. See, no union, no trust without social proof, credit, debt, etc. Blah, 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 blah. But if you're not in someone's debt, etc., or you never paid, you know, debts, etc., or you never debited somebody's account, which is a financial vernacular, and if you're in accounting or finance, you understand what I'm saying because it's backwards in business. You know, I think QT gas station now has this thing where they switch the coffee around. So it'll say, you know, their Star brand and this brand to see if you could tell the difference or whatever. It's just a psychological game that they're playing. It's quite childish, but they do it. It is what it is. But if there's no union, there's no trust between two individuals. And that's because there's no social proof. Well, why are you in a relationship? Oh, well, he has a job, he has money, he has this, that, and the third, etc. But if somebody strips that away from you, well, then is it still real, right? Can a person go to school, get their law degree, or go to the military, or go to the medical school, or whatever, and then not get a job, and then say they're a doctor or a lawyer, and people need this, they got to see the proof, but there's no money, there's no business suit, there's the social engineering breaks down. And if you can't see past that, then you don't understand the illusion at play within the matrix that resides amongst all of us, right? This is why you hear people say, oh, fake news, this, that, and the third. Well, the news controls the narrative, which controls the mind because it works based upon the air. So if you're utilizing the air to manipulate the current emotional status within somebody's central nervous system, because you like to play with string theory, because the nerves in the body or the central nervous system operate like sewing thread in the body, like string theory. It moves throughout and communicates with electronic signals between the brain, spinal column, and everything else to tell you how to do things, how to move, etc., BPMs, vice versa, blah, blah, blah. Well, then you would need to understand air, land, and sea, right? You would need to understand how the air operates to communicate with the sea, because sometimes it could switch the current around, right? A strong gust of wind can create waves. I don't know if you can see this, but I'm at a lake right now and the wind is blowing and the water is moving, right? So that's the air affecting the sea, right? So if the Air Force jumped in and they wanted to, well, play a little psychological experiment, use direct energy technology or weapons, etc. I mean, you saw Golden Circle, and the truth is that in jest, I mean, Golden Circle, they use the SIM card or a cell phone device to mess with people's brains, right? Sending different signals and everything like that. And with that, you can control people's emotions, right? On top of it, if everybody understands how to play, right? So the word play in the con or charlatan world is where everybody knows their line except for the mark, right? And that's how a perfect play or con plays out, right? Because they speak with confidence, right? Not conviction. There's a difference. So, and what's the difference? Confidence is one thing. Conviction is not only because you believe something, but you probably did your fucking research and due diligence, and so you're getting emotionally upset. And the way you're using your rhetoric, people will threaten to throw you in jail or convict you. So you better know what you're speaking of and present evidence or something that's factual that can back it up. Hence why speaking with conviction is different than speaking with confidence, because sometimes people might be trying to find something out in or end something, right? Fidence, fin, which is French, right, for end, right? Confidence. And people are dense or thick-headed sometimes. So let's get to the last 2 points here. There's a difference between civilian techniques and military techniques. Civilians live as though, military lives knowing that things as life are finite, right? And so they have two different reasons and ways that they carry things out. One protects people so they could continue doing the stupid shit that they're doing wherever it is that they're protecting. And then the others, well, they act as if, right? Oh, just see if tomorrow's going to be a better day. Or they act as though nothing's going to happen. Or they act as though this, that, and the third. Others understand that things are finite, right? How do you know? Well, they were doing an arty clearing and it was supposed to be, but another ammo tech went out there. And when he picked up the mortar round after the rover touched it, it was cooking off. The ammo tech and the EOD tech just exploded right in front. And that's how fast life goes, right? Or a 7-ton rolls over and crushes someone's head and they're still alive, so on and so forth. And you hear them moaning and everything like that. And one of your, people are looking at you, a Lance Cooley or a PFC, and it says, what do I do? You say, go take care of Simpson, etc. He's still alive. So you don't get to experience that in the civilian world, nor do you care or give a fuck until it affects you. See, because a bacteria can be, defeated with antibiotics. A virus, not so much, right? So how did they create vaccinations for COVID? It wasn't a bacteria. They needed to retrain your DNA, your programming. Do your research before you jump on a high horse, right? Some rumors out there said that they were using psychology and that Obama and all those people that they showed that people look up to, that have a large following, got a saline shot. It wasn't even the vaccination. But they needed to convince others to take the vaccination to make sure that it was not only safe, but that it would work, right? So that those that were in positions of power, control, money, dominance, etc., blah, 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 were able to take it as well, or had a cure, or whatever, right? How did they figure that out in 2 years? In less than 2 years. They can't figure out other stuff, but they figured that out. Because it could affect everybody, including the individuals that have the medical degrees, law degrees, and everything else. Think about it. Remember, Fury, we just had Operation Fury, and this is for educational purposes. Operation Fury, Nick Fury, the Avengers, etc., held out to see if the Avengers could do their job. Doctor Strange, who was formerly a doctor, right, didn't state to Tony that he had to sacrifice himself. He just said that there was one option. And Nick Fury could have made that one phone call, which so on and so forth. But what did Captain Marvel say? It's for emergencies only. And if the Avengers are supposed to be able to handle it, they could have handled it. But because not everybody was informed, well, then they didn't look at Fury as a person that should have just made the call, right? Because Thanos getting rid of 50% of the population, who kind of looked like Frieza with his gold armor and purple and all that. It's like He launched a advanced version of, let's say, Ebola or COVID, and it wiped out 50% of the population. And now he has to call and make the emergency call, right? Why wait so long? Ha ha, you triggered my trap card. Ha ha, you triggered my trump card, right? So look at it that way, right? Because the truth is set in jest, and they know the rules. They can't lie, but they'll put it out there in a format in which not everybody can see, right? Right? Or hear. Or is that hear and see, right? Or are they trying to speak up because they're trying to say something? Are they treating the person as hostile? So they're speaking up with an elevated voice, different tone and pitch? Do your research. Last point here before we wrap up. If you could, would you seek or take hearsay? If so, then it is your fault for not seeking, which leaves one into wrong teaching, but the lazy will always end with hearsay because they heard someone say, or someone with more credibility, followers, subscribers, money, social proof, etc. And they believe that because psychologically, remember the pitchfork guys, Greek lettering, mythology, Navy SEALs. If they're able to get into the mind, the body goes where the if how do I say this? The body goes where the mind goes, right? So if you train the mind a certain way, the body will follow, right? So they'll end in hearsay because with what they heard someone say, or etc., or worse, right? Or technology, right? Oh, that direct energy stuff is fake. That was only in a movie. And if I told you 75 years ago you would be utilizing a device to make money on social media, you'd ask me what S&M is. I say go listen to Rihanna. But you know, you'd be talking on a cordless phone. You'd say someone was crazy. They have, I don't know, psychiatric issues. You need to go talk to somebody. You need to talk to a clinical professional, right? Or you need to go talk to a psychiatrist. There's an ist in there, the IST. If you study the Bible, you know where psychology came from. No one looked for Judas, or is that a Juris? A Juris, a Judas? Who knows? Maybe he kissed somebody to say in another format, kiss his ass goodbye, right? You ever heard the expression, kiss that ass goodbye? Jesus rode in on a donkey known as an ass, correct? And Judas, kissed his ass goodbye. Weird. So if tech can be manipulated to say something, etc., AI with hallucinations, Gemini, ChatGPT, etc., then what are you not doing? Because you're lazy, right? It's like, I remember when the Jetsons came out. It's a cartoon, and the Flintstones. And George Jetson and Jane, they used to watch themselves on television working out. And they're like, yep, I got to work out today. All right, that's it, so on and so forth. That's one way of doing it. But then P90X came out, and people got to work out with the television, right? And then, of course, they would have FaceTime. Now, during the time of the Jetsons and the Flintstones and all that, people said that that was crazy. It's the future. But now we have FaceTime. We have Zoom. Still think it's too far-fetched. I mean, really understand that the truth is said in jest. It just hasn't been released to the public yet. It may have been released to specific individuals, but they probably have privilege. And if you don't know what privilege means, then go look up clearance, not Clarence. And Clarence lives at home with his parents. And Clarence's parents had a real good marriage. These cat don't want to battle. He shook. Ain't no such things as halfway crooks. Scared to death, you're scared to look. In his fucking yearbook. Right? Remember, he said free world's got you gassed up. What's gaslighting? What's the free world? Because there's a difference between freedom and liberty. That's why she sits out at sea. And when you travel, that's why you have passport bros, etc. And at sea, you're granted liberty off ship. So let's finish this out here. like someone telling an employee to lie to a client to continue to get paid. I've had this experience. I worked for a marketing agency. Literally, they asked me at one point to lie to a client to keep them there. I said, no, we're going to talk about how we're going to fix the situation and then make that shit happen. And they're like, no, I need you to lie about it. No, not in business, because we have a code of ethics, read them, we have a policy. And then if we get brought to court, they're going to bring in business ethics that they teach in law school that a fucking attorney or lawyer would demolish your ass in court over because you didn't study that, madam. But yet I got fired because I didn't lie to the client and they lost the client. They're a little greedy, all right? They were green, etc. But then again, if you look around, what's green? What's green? What's green? Well, then if you know how to take care of everything that's green, then you know how to paint with all the colors of the wind. Like Pocahontas said, remember, what's on the air, right? It used to be RBG. Can you paint with all the colors of the wind? So, I mean, think about it. They just remade Black Flag, right? But they also made The Librarian. And Captain Flynn, well, was pretty awesome in both, wasn't he? You had Flint, Captain Flint, in Black Sails, all right? That's a TV show on HBO. Then you had Flynn from the movie The Librarian that turned into a TV show. See, the first one was about the Spear of Destiny. The second one was about Solomon's Temple. And the third one was about the Judas Chalice, which was the pieces of silver that Judas got for delivering a kiss to somebody, getting put on a cross, etc., that they melted down into a chalice that converted people into something else. You should watch it. It's pretty interesting. So just take this as with what you will. This is lesson, what is it? Lesson 58. Right? We had 11 points in this lesson. And for those of you that haven't seen the zodiac sign Cancer, right? 11 plus 58 equals 69. So if you ever hear the word ruby, know that, well, I have a family member that was born in July, and that just happens to be a birthstone or a birth gem. Now, Gem was going to be a holding company that I thought I was going to start, and then other people wanted to utilize it for themselves. That's perfectly fine, but they wanted to play around with Ruby and then do other things. Remember, don't get stuck on stupid. Psychology would say don't see red, right? Because when you see red, you're dead, right? And think about that, right? Why? What's green that people don't know how to protect sometimes, right? Well, he's an environmentalist. Really? Because what's in your pocket that's green? Oh, he might be a financial person. Or he could be an auditor, and maybe one day a forensic auditor, right? Why? Why did they get fired? Were they a foreigner? So you call them forensics? Are you sick? Are you mentally demented? Or you do not know how to jumble up letters or make things rhyme? Diversity, equity, and inclusion also spell other things like die or IED. Think about it, right? But it's enunciated differently, or if it's spelt differently, right? Because if it's spelled die, D-I-E, then it can't be die, D-A-I. Remember, slave is one word. You mix a couple letters around in the same word, it spells in a different language, salve, which means to save in Spanish. But it was translated from the Greek into Latin. I'll talk to you guys in the next lesson. This has been a pleasure of mine, and I'll see you in the next lesson of class. Peace.